Late last week, we saw the S&P 500 gapping lower from this upper level consolidation. Then we saw the fear and greed index go from greedy territory back over into neutral. Are we about to go over into fear? And I want to share with you guys a stat that shows what happens typically the day before elections. Keep in mind, November 5th is going to be the presidential elections. And it's not just the elections this week that we have to worry about. On Thursday, Jay Powell is going to be taking the podium. Are they going to cut rates by only 25 basis points? Or are they going to start to get a lot more aggressive after the dismal jobs report that we saw on Friday? We come over real quick and look at the most recent investor sentiment survey. What do we see? The bulls got a little bit more bullish, jumping from 37.7 to 39.5. We look at the candidates over in neutral territory. We went from 32.4 to 29.6. However, the bears also increased as well. And we're going to find out shortly who is right. Is it the bulls or is it the bears? And we have even more to worry about than the elections, the Fed taking the podium. We also have a lot of earnings coming out next week. If we look at which earnings are expected to be big movers next week, we have Palantir coming out plus or minus 14%, ARM plus or minus 14% on Wednesday, Lyft plus or minus 16%, Qualcomm plus or minus 10%, Firm on Thursday plus or minus 18%, and Rivian plus or minus 16%. So we have a lot of stocks next week that have the potential for some very large moves in the market. Now, if we look at this article from MarketWatch, the stock market gives this candidate a 70% chance to be the next US president. And let me know in the comment section down below, do you guys think the stock market can accurately predict who is going to win the presidential election? Because right here, this article goes on to say, Harris has a 70% chance of winning the presidential election on November 5th. Now, if we look at the sectors from last week and go ahead and look at performance, we can see communication services led the way last week, followed by consumer cyclicals. Every other sector was in the red. Technology was in the red by the most, followed by real estate, energy, then utilities. On Friday, though, we can see technology was actually in the green, and we had a little bit of action after the bell. If we look at this article right here, NVIDIA to replace Intel in the Dow Jones Industrial Average. And if we look at how NVIDIA finished out here on Friday, basically having an inside day, but wait, we look after hours and yikes, what a rocket ship on the way up. We go ahead and we measure from the closing price to the highest point up here. That was up roughly 3.27%. We actually closed, we were actually up about 2.89%. So now if we do open around that level, that's going to put NVIDIA on the path to making another run towards all-time highs. Then we look at Intel. We can see Intel on Friday having a little bit of a bullish candle. However, after the bell, not doing so well. We can see Intel essentially getting a haircut out there. Now, before we come over and take a look at something that could be a problem for the market coming up this next week, let's take a look at this stat. And what this stat basically goes on to say is when the S&P 500 breaks a 5-month winning streak, here are the results. If we look 1 month later, out of the last 31 occurrences that this has happened, 23 of those next months have been up, 8 have been down. However, if we start looking at the quarter or even 6 months later and a year later, we can see we have very good stats, up 28, down 3, up 25, down 6. So even though we ended up closing October slightly red, this stat brought to us by Wayne actually shows that it might not be as bad as some people may fear. If we look at this article right here, we can see Iran says they are not done. They're going to go ahead and they're going to respond to what Israel already did to them. So is it just going to be a tit for tat? We're going to keep going back and forth. If that's going to be the case, one thing we do want to keep an eye on is going to be crude oil. If indeed Iran goes on the offensive, that could cause crude oil to start spiking up higher. Now, crude oil bulls would be happy. Those of us at the pumps, not so happy out here. And keep in mind, crude oil still has a gap up here at about 73.86. Now, something else we'll want to pay attention to is going to be the volatility index. Now, we can see that on Thursday, we had a massive move up. I think we closed up roughly 13%. And what that indicated was we were likely going to see an adverse reaction on Friday, meaning the market was likely going to go ahead and be green. And we see the VIX starting to come back down. Well, the VIX essentially had an inside day. Then we look at the SPY. The SPY did close up. However, it closed near the lower end of the session. Now, something else we want to pay attention to in terms of the fear over in the Middle East. pay attention to gold. We can see on Thursday, gold absolutely getting slapped down. And we look at where gold could be coming on the way back lower. It's going to be right within this minus development area around 17.17, somewhere in that ballpark. We start breaching through that, then we're going to look for gold to come back towards this high volume area. However, don't think that gold is done going up. Gold in the longer term could still have a lot higher price targets. I'm just saying in the near term. Also, be on the lookout. Could it be left shoulder, head, and we form some type of right shoulder over here? Then we come down towards this area, and then maybe just maybe we'll be looking for a buying opportunity somewhere around that price point. Now, I wanted to let you guys know you may not see Apex with any 80% off sales. However, at the time of recording this video, if you use promo code Mike, 80% discount will still be applied to your account. So if you want to take advantage of this offer, use the link in the description box down below. Use promo code Mike at checkout. Now, I want to share with you guys this stat brought to us by Almanac Trader. And what it goes on to show is Dow Jones and S&P 500 are up 83.3% of the time the day before election. So you know what that means. Monday, there's the 83% chance that the Dow and S&P 500 will be green. And that stat goes all the way back to 1952. Now, if we look at the NASDAQ's only up 76.9% of the time. Russell 2000 up 81.8. Then we look at election day or day after. And if we come over and we look real quick, we can see that we're only up 61.1% of the time for the Dow, 66.7 for the S&P. However, the NASDAQ and Russell are up a little bit more, 69.2 and 72.7. Now, if we go back and look at 2016 during the elections, we can see that the Dow and S&P were both up over 2% the day before elections. However, if we just move right over here to the right, we can see the day after they were only up 0.40 and 0.38. So we're going to see, do we follow that same path again this time around? Let me know your thoughts in the comment section down below. Now we come over and look at the Dow Jones Industrial Average real quick. What do we see? We see a big wick on the way up, essentially filling the gap that we had left behind from Thursday. However, on the daily chart, the MACD still looks extremely weak. Then we come over and look at the small caps real quick. And we can see on Friday, we have a little bit of a selling tail on top of the candle, but essentially we have an inside day, meaning the high of the Russell is lower than the high from the prior day. The low from Friday was higher than the low from the prior day, and that sets the stage that we are likely going to get a breakout or breakdown from this pattern. And if we follow that same path of that stat that I showed you guys the day before elections, we'll see, can we go ahead and get a bullish push up and out? Now we come over and we look at the NASDAQ, the QQQs real quick. Keep in mind, we still have a ABC pattern up here at about 510.33, but if we look at this candle, notice we closed in the lower third of the range with a bearish engulfing candle. We basically had two candles back to back with small bodies on them. We opened above them. We closed well below that price point. Then we come over and look at the daily chart. We've had this upper level consolidation. Now we've been able to break below it. We came back for the retest. Similar to what we talked about with the Russell 2000, the NASDAQ has an inside day. Question is, will we be able to come up here and close the gap either before or slightly after the elections? Or is that all she wrote? Are we going to continue to melt down lower? To the downside, some of the targets I would want to watch would be about 478.35, then maybe down here towards about 473.13. Now, as we come over and look at the futures markets real quick, we had quite a large range out here last week, 780 points. Now, we have a couple key volume profile levels I most certainly want to pay attention to. Notice we have a point of control up here, which will be an untested point of control at 20,588 and a quarter. Value area high is going to be way up here at 20,787.75, and value area low is 20,202.75. Now, what I like about this is we close below value area low. So what does that mean? It means highly probable that this week we are going to come back and test value area low at minimum. Let's not forget, we also have some structure breakdown points that would likely come back and be repaired as well, along with any of these minus development areas within the profile that could come back and get tested this week. I really like this whole area of the profile for a potential bounce up this week. And that really comes in anywhere from about 420 all the way down here to about 291. So again, that zone will be an area I will be looking for. However, in order to know, should I go ahead and play that move up, one qualification factor would be, can we get above value area low on the weekly, or come over here and look at the daily profiles as well. On Friday, we kind of have a D as in dog shaped profile, but notice if we start to dip down on Asia come Sunday night, this is going to be an area I will want to focus on. That's going to be anywhere from about 116 up here to about 133. Now, as we look at the volume profile levels, notice value area low comes in at 20,134. Point of control will come in at 20,163, with value area high being 20,254. Now, if we can stay above value area low, I will give the edge to the bulls out here and see if we can start pushing towards value area high, or even this minus development area somewhere about 20,204. Now, if you guys are noticing this chart, notice we have an untested point of control, 20,651, and we still have that gap down that we saw on Thursday, along with an untested point of control way up here as well at about 20,567. Now, if we're going to come up here and test that value area low, it's probably going to be on the backs of the market liking the candidate that was elected to be president, or maybe the market just likes what Jay Powell has to say during the FOMC press conference coming out next Thursday. Now, if we look at the economic calendar real quick, what do we have on deck next week? Well, if we look at Monday, really no major economic news. We look out here on Tuesday, we have ISM services PMI at 10 a.m. Then we have the elections taking place. Then on Wednesday, we have crude oil inventory numbers coming out, final services PMI at 9:45. On Thursday, the Bank of England has their monetary policy statement. We also have the unemployment claims. Then at 2 p.m. and 2:30, we have the FOMC statement. Then at 2:30, Jay Powell takes the podium. Now on Friday, we have preliminary consumer sentiment followed by preliminary inflation expectations. Now, as we come over and look at the SPY out here on the weekly chart, we can see that ABC pattern at 592.09 has not been hit yet. Then last week, we had a bearish candle close in the lower third of the range. We come over and look at the daily chart. We have basically an inside day after gapping down below this upper level consolidation. MACD indicator looks weak at this moment. Then as we come over and look at the futures markets, notice we closed below value area low, which is really going to come in at 5777.75, with the point of control being 5878.75, value area high being 5892.75. Now, notice on the profile, very poor market structure. We also have a structure breakdown point at some point should come back and get tested. Now, as we look at the daily profiles, notice what we see. We're down near value area low. So 57.52.5 is going to be value area low off the daily. The point of control is right above us, sitting here at 57.60.50, with value area high being about 57.84.50. Now, if we can stay above value area low, or if we go below value area low and start coming back up, I want to stay on the buy side. Now, keep in mind, we have that gap down from last Thursday night, like we talked about with the NASDAQ, along with that untested value area low up here at 58.59.50. Now, do I think we hit this before the elections? No. And just like I talked about with the NASDAQ, either it's going to be the market loves the candidate that won the elections, or Jay Powell comes through with a huge market moving press conference. Now, if you trade with prop firms and you want to learn about copy trading across multiple accounts, make sure to watch this video right here.